Что-то. Мгм, мгм. Welcome, everyone. Our panel today is about student-centered teaching of Russian as a foreign language. And I would like to remind everyone that we dedicate this panel to the memory of our dear colleague, Cindy Martin, who passed away very unexpectedly recently. I will share one memory of my work with Cindy before we move on. I wanted to, one unfulfilled wish I had in working with Cindy. We co-edited, for those of you that are not familiar with the situation, Cindy and I co-edited a volume on student-centered teaching of Russian that was published in the Routledge's volume, in the Routledge's of series for Russian, teaching Russian and researching it. And I kept talking to Cindy and asking her, Cindy, will please write preface. Every book of the of the series has a preface. And she's like, yeah, I need to do that. I have she was like, yes, we should do that, and I will do that, and I have so many ideas. It's, preface is usually this bird's eye view of the field of where we are, and how we can help our field develop, and never happened. Cindy did not write any one of those, and I just encourage you to never put off anything. Never put off anything. If you want to write something, write it. If you want to teach something, teach it. That's my memory of Cindy. I learned a lot from her. She was my linguistic experience. She was my human experience of a teacher. And today we remember her in our profession as a student educator, as a teacher of students. She's remembered as a prolific author. She authored several textbooks and other publications, particularly chapters, scholarly chapters. And we also remember Cindy as an amazing teacher educator who had the heart for teachers and was lived the profession. She lived with this teaching of Russian. Not only led the program in Maryland University, it was her life. So with this, I'm welcoming everyone. And of course, if you have memories of Cindy, of course, please share in when you start speaking. And if not, maybe you read some of her articles, and this session is still devoted to her memory, and we appreciate your participation in it. Opening up, I just want to briefly say some super surprising things I learned about students and teaching and learning. And I will ask you to write down what comes to mind when you think student-centeredness. Write in the chat one word, couple of words. Do you know of a definition of student-centeredness? Other definitions? We have definitions for everything these days. So your ideas about student-centeredness, if you have a definition of it or one word description, one couple of word description, what student-centeredness is to you. We'll just do one minute, one quick minute. Love this empathy-driven approach. Students take responsibility of their learning, engaging them. Starting point of curricular planning. Student independence. Awesome ideas. Thank you so much for sharing. Student agency. Student being interested and caring for what they learn. Exactly. So in our keep putting your ideas in there, and it's so amazing. In our research of what student-centeredness actually is, what I found was, and actually I didn't think about it until I read in one article that this researcher wrote his own literature review and found 326 definitions of student-centeredness. And at that point, he was like, "Well, we don't need any more definitions. I think we said everything we could. Now we just need some frameworks into how to determine, is this teaching student-centeredness? Are there some tenets of maybe student-centeredness?" So in a couple of our chapters in the student-centered volume, in the volume on student-centered teaching of Russian, Cindy and I came up with these tables and some ideas of how people can actually look at their teaching and think, is this student-centered teaching? Am I being student-centered in this way? Maybe I can change a little bit something somewhere. One of the feedbacks we received on our editorial articles was that was Wendy Whitehead Martell. She said, I appreciate how you look at student-centeredness, that it's not a once done, like something that you, something concrete that you put in place and always, and it's always there. It's student-centeredness is this idea. It's a continuum that you can be more student-centered maybe in your grading. You can be more student-centered in how students submit their work. You can be more student-centered, and we give you some choices how that could play out in your classes. With that, I will yield the floor to our first presenter. And our first presenter today is Ludmilla Beckett. She's one of our authors with several actual volumes that Routledge put together in the series of teaching Russian as teaching and researching Russian. And Ludmilla, you will be sharing your own slides, right?
So, okay, I've never met Cynthia, but of course we worked on the volume, and the circumstances were quite tragic at the time, because when the reviewer's report came back, the war broke out, and I was really in shock, and I was thinking to pull out from the volume. But thank you to Cynthia, and thank you for Svetlana for their support and their understanding. So eventually everything settled down, and I submitted my chapter. Also, I applied for Cynthia's Roundtable, and I pulled out for the same reason, because now it's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was scheduled for 3 o'clock in the morning, and I couldn't participate. So this time, what I'm talking about, it says cooking and traveling. We can rephrase the title of the book, Eat, Pray, Love, and we can say Eat, Travel, Love. And I will talk about warm-up activities in the class, because I participated yesterday in the session, and I heard that many teachers introduced some projects, and it's very interesting, but sometimes we do not have time for this. And usually every class we start with 5 minutes of warming up. And this is the sort of tradition that I was introduced in my alma mater. And we have 7 minutes for charging students with some energy, with some basic interaction. And I will talk how to tailor topics according to their interest. And now we are up to the second slide. Second slide, please. Warm up is an introduction to classroom activities and tuning to language practices. It facilitates students' engagement with language and topics. And usually it opens up day-to-day vocabulary, allows for checking student pronunciation, may target certain grammatical issues, and helps build connections between sounds and letters, if we are at the very beginning. It activates ubiquitous strategies, and introduce task-based activities so that students can use their experience of the world to fill the gap in their language competence. So if I have to sum up, it's a student-oriented activity tailored to spark their interest. It helps students form realistic expectations and strategies for learning. So it is the main principles, of course, student-centeredness and intercultural approach for teaching Russian. And as Cynthia and Svetlana outlined in their volume, so there are three main principles of student-centeredness. It's knowing your students, enhance students' ability to use language outside of the classroom and to draw on their experience. And of course, everyone has an experience with food. And even if they didn't travel, and yesterday I heard that many students do not know where Crimea is and never traveled in their life, but at least they know names of dishes and names of dishes that sort of cursor to their traveling. So the second principle is designing motivating tasks that meet students' expectations, and usually students, their minimum expectation is to see something online in Russian and to see memes or to see Instagram and understand and have a basic understanding, comprehension of what's going on online. And also they like to talk about their day-to-day experience. And we accommodate innovation. In this particular presentation, I will tell you how to use Russian memes, but also there are YouTube's, Instagram, and other facilities. So in the volume which Svetlana and Cynthia edited, there was sort of a critical evaluation of student-centered teaching. And it was Elias and Memoriam, and they say that it basically leads to trivial issues and leads to anti-intellectualism. So in my presentation, I have to touch it that even if you talk about simple issues, it doesn't mean that we use primitive, it's not a primitive, it's not anti-intellectualism. And of course, the intercultural approach for teaching Russian, and Berdichevsky and Golubeva outlined it in their book. It's understanding specifics of your own culture and formation of cross-cultural awareness in the process of communication. And so we have to structure students' communication. Could I please have the next slide? Can I have the next slide? So, what basic communicative strategy we use in warm-up exchanges is its identification of object and situation. It's a very basic level, and using Russian names for them. Then we can use comparison of objects, finding differences between them, ranking your preferences, and rank our preferences. Then another task, it's more complicated. It's a composition task, integration of elements into new entities. And I will show you with cooking recipes how it works. One of the most difficult strategies and built-in cause and effect relations between objects and entities, and usually it comes with the with the question which starts with why, but also if, then I'll give you some examples. So I'll give you some samples of basic strategy and identification and naming. You can have, so there are plenty of memes online. So this is a meme what русские едят на завтрак, and you can ask just the students to name food items that are on the picture. Then, as you can see, this is a Paris, and it's obviously French breakfast. And you can ask also students to name objects that are on the picture. But on the other hand, you can divide students in groups, and some students work with pictures. Some students have to activate their stereotypes about Russian breakfast or French breakfast, and then you can compare pictures with what students gave you. With breakfast, there are plenty of opportunities. There are, yes, the next, please, the next slide, please, Svetlana. You can, so if you have a big group, you can give them different pictures, and you have an English breakfast, an Italian breakfast, Polish breakfast, Spanish breakfast, and Mexican breakfast. And if you work with them on the introductory level, on the level of phonology, you can even structure some menu which gives them an opportunity to have a match between sounds and letters. For instance, you can hissing sounds like it's very good if you give them Japanese cuisine. It comes with sushi, sashimi, and then Spanish cuisine also give you some hissing sounds like chorizo, churros, and then you can add harcho, it's a Georgian one. But so basically they know the names in English and they sound the same in Russian, but they don't know how to spell them. So you can ask them just to help you with writing of those sounds. It's on the very basic level. So when we activate different types of breakfasts, as you can see, Mexicansky breakfast, and then this is a basic task, naming the objects. Then we go to comparison. You can next day or in another session, you can introduce some comparisons. This is a meme which I found online, and so it gives you English, French, German, and Russian breakfast, and usually they have some humorous underpinning. Sometimes the humor is clumsy, but this is they are memes. You can't control them. You can't ask memes to be all politically correct. So you can make a basic comparison and say which Zavtrak is more more filling, which breakfast is easier to cook, which breakfast is more expensive, which breakfast you choose for yourself, and then you can ask why Russian breakfast is without food. So they can give you different answers because this is the humorous component. Maybe the people are on diet. Maybe they don't have money because they spent on some expensive purchases.
I apologize. You have your 5-minute mark.
So yes, and so this is a comparison strategies that is sort of a little bit more advanced. Can I have the next slide, please? Because, now integration task, as you can see, you can give them some ingredients. You have яйцо, масло, вода, соль, перец, сметана, молоко, кастрюля, сковородка. Какой завтрак вы приготовите? And you give them слова для справок. And each student can choose their own word. For instance, you give them straight away the picture and then try to make the recipe. Or they can sort of try to, without picture, make their own, and then you introduce them, then you show them pictures. And then you discuss it for each meal in the picture. So can I have the next slide, please? Yes, again, we can do the same thing with bread. There are and there are options with pictures, and there are recipes. And can I have the next slide? So building cause and effect, this is the most difficult strategy. And Usually students should be quite advanced. They should be maybe intermediate level for that. And you can ask them why it's better to prepare closed sandwiches and not open sandwiches for picnics. And there are some answers I gave you that you can sort of steer students towards them. And then you can ask why, почему хлеб стали мазать маслом. And with food, it's very interesting because many dishes, they come with their legends or myths. And with this butterbrot, particularly, there is a legenda Copernic, who used butter to see dirt on the bread that was dropped. And because there was an epidemic at the time. So again, I gave you some answers, and you can sort of make connection between names of the person and names of the dish, like sandwich. And can I have the next slide? So this is this sort of memes with humorous components, and they require quite maybe, again, intermediate level of comprehension. And you can see there is a pun here. There is a stomatolog. Какую пасту предпочитаете? And he means toothpaste. And the cat answers pasta carbonara, which he means that sort of food. And students are capable to find out why it's so funny, because there is a discrepancies between what is expected and what's answered. So I gave you some samples, and again, it's about a comparison between macaroni po-flotsky and macaroni bolognese. So again, built up connections with origin of the food, and there is this is again, you can work also with food. There are plenty of idioms, and one of them is завтрак съешь сам, обед раздели с другом, ужин отдай врагу. And then we can see meme, нет у меня ни друзей, ни врагов. So you can ask, if we apply this idiom, what does it mean for the diet of the person who doesn't have friends and enemies? And this is a very good example of intercultural approach. You can try to find an English counterpart, and you can try to find what it means. So why you can't eat in the evening, and things as such.
1 minute more.
Yeah, and can I have another slide, please? So we are basically, I'm trying to end this, and the assessment. Yesterday there was quite a discussion, what should we assess, what should we evaluate, and what you shouldn't. It's for me, it's an individual choice of the teacher. It also depends on your classroom and on your targets, because sometimes you have to dedicate your classroom activities to some bigger task. But usually, if you assess, like give 30% of the total mark for classroom activities, you can give 5% for warm-up exchanges. And it helps with disciplining students and their timely arrival at class. Alternatively, you can use motivation labels. So you say that someone like is a spaceship, someone is like airplane, or there is a train, and there are different trains. So that gives also some perspective, gives some idea about risk. And teachers can mix up topics in warm-ups offered in each class. For instance, food can be followed by chats about cities and sites there. Teachers can choose random topics: food and travel, and sports, domestic animals, TV programs, films, books, housekeeping, idioms relating to a field and others. Alternatively, teachers may choose a sequence of closely related topics and day by day, each day introducing the same field. So it's also it's student-centered activities, but it's also decision of an individual, of a teacher in a particular classroom. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing, Ludmilla, and at 4 o'clock in the morning. This is quite the effort.
I haven't had my breakfast yet, so it's a
Speaking of
temptation. It's a
right.
temptation.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We have one more participant who is also the wee hours of the morning. 2 часа утра, 3 часа утра, уже, наверное, Татьяна, для вас, да? Пожалуйста, вы будете сама свои слайды, да, share, Татьяна?
Да, давайте я попробую. Вроде как я могу, да? Вот так
Да,
вот.
да, уже мы видим все на экране, уже что-то такое начинает появляться. Еще пока нет, но начинает уже появляться.
И вот так вот, да, я могу сделать.
Отлично, да. Мгм.
Ага. Так, секундочку. Так.
Татьяна пока делает свою share, я вам расскажу. Татьяна, я не буду steal ваше thunder, вы сама расскажете про ваши отношения с Cindy, но я хочу сказать, что она о вас помнила и всегда помнила о вас. Я писала какую-то статью уже после нашей работы совместной, и Cindy смотрела одну из моих статей и сказала: ну, Светлана, ну а почему бы не упомянуть Татьяну здесь? А я просто не успела тогда вставить еще link на ссылку на вашу статью. Она: ну а как же, ну почему бы не упомянуть Татьяну здесь и ее статью? Привет вам
Ой,
от
очень, да, приятно, да, особенно в такой, у меня сейчас, такая ситуация, да, действительно, и время, и все на свете, я сейчас нахожусь не по своей воле, так скажем, в России, то есть по семейным обстоятельствам, и вот должна вернуться в мае в Штаты, но, да, то есть сейчас у меня немножко поздненько, но для меня, да, большая честь, конечно, вспомнить такого замечательного человека. Конечно, Синди, ну, сыграла невероятную роль в моей жизни, в профессиональной и даже в общечеловеческой, поэтому это, конечно, очень, очень трепетно для меня. Так, ну вот, если вы не против, можно я вот таким образом буду, потому что я иначе свои не вижу ноутс, оказывается, я вот это. Или если вы хотите, если вам удобнее, может, все-таки, даже не знаю.
Что, давайте,
В
Татьяна,
таком
прекрасно.
формате ничего, не против?
Отлично, спасибо.
Хорошо. Ну, еще раз, да, тогда вот I'd like to begin by expressing my deepest gratitude to Cynthia for the invaluable role that she played in my professional development and my growth. And I first met her at one of the OPI workshops, and I was immediately impressed by her professionalism, her passion for teaching, her clear and engaging speaking style, and the strength of her message. I couldn't believe that she was American at first. I was so convinced that she was Russian. She looked so Russian to me, and she had that, like, this feeling and the spirit of a true Russian woman. I was so shocked to actually find out that she was American, like the first time I met her. So she actually visited our university with a 2-day workshop as well, and I had a privilege to show her around our small town. I'm sorry. Yeah, is that okay? Yeah, it's all good. Small town of Dahlonega in Georgia, and I had a chance to seek her advice since I was still at the early age of my teaching career, and she inspired and motivated me professionally and personally. So later, I actually humbly asked her to be one of my external committee members for the dissertation. And this is how she continued supporting and guiding me in my research and teaching career, for that matter, in general. So as you all know, probably, and so this is what I shared with her, this feeling, that this belief we both strongly believe that students' success in attaining foreign language proficiency and cultural competence depends on their motivation, great and efficient regulation of their time and effort. So my dissertation project was inspired by the concept of self-regulated learning in teaching Russian as a foreign language. So, and that fostering self-regulated behavior in students is usually not something that teachers like devote too much attention to, from my personal experience as well. So, and we either expect them to already be quite self-regulated or hope that they will just develop the qualities on their own. And they probably will with time, but I wanted to see if there was a way to foster that development in the early stage of teaching Russian. So I often teach the first year of Russian, and I wanted to investigate how my novice Russian students strategically approach learning Russian and how promoting self-efficacy impacts their self-regulated learning. And I also wanted to see if there is any difference in language learning approaches of higher and lower self-regulated students, so I could structure my teaching accordingly. So next slide, please. Sorry, I control that. Okay. So yeah, that's what I talked about, that I was focused on the theory of self-regulated learning. So I worked on I wanted to see how I could incorporate an instructional method that rooted actually in Bandura's social cognitive theory, and I used Oxford's strategic self-regulation model as a conceptual model for my project. But Bandura's concept of self-efficacy ties closely to self-regulated learning, where learners manage cognitive, metacognitive, motivational, and contextual aspects of learning. So, and Oxford's model, so I have so hopefully you can see her framework here. So her model highlights how learners actively use strategies to manage their cognitive, affective, and sociocultural interaction processes during learning. So we've all heard of cognition and metacognition, but she also claims that learners can use that meta level to navigate affect and social cultural interaction as well, not just cognition. So what I proposed that was that following those phases of self-regulated learning, like how you build and how you work with tasks. So I proposed that students would work with some course-based can-do statements. So following the three-phase task completion model that was that I demonstrated and practiced in class for the first 2 times. And the following weekly in-class discussions consisted of the students' practice of the can-do statements in small groups in the target language and brief exchanges of strategies and techniques that work best for them. So, and as you can see, so those were this is the samples, like one of the weeks, in the first semesters, I believe it was, week 4, can-do statements. And so I asked them to do the following. So for instance, so think of lexical items and grammatical structures that they would need to for performing the task. So I would explain that first in the first couple of weeks. I would explain that explicitly in English, what they need to do. And make sure you know where to find that information in case you need a review. So then they would say all the statements out loud for each statement. And for each statement, they would pose a question for somebody else for the information they need. And again, so I would ask them like be conscious and be and know some techniques that will help them best for mastering the tasks. And notice also what create any difficulty. And finally, so after they've practiced the statements and reviewed the material necessary for the task, so they would rate the statements according to their confidence and how well they can perform each task. So I used, so since it was a dissertation project, so I used a mixed method design that included identifying the groups of lower and higher self-regulated students. And I surveyed and interviewed both groups to analyze how they approach and regulate the learning process. So in this study actually provided some key insights in how they approach language study in their first semester. So, and a major finding was that students with higher self-regulation used more metacognitive strategies like planning, monitoring, or evaluating their learning, while lower self-regulated students mainly relied on basic cognitive strategies, focused on just processing new information, for instance. And this actually aligns with the SLA, second language acquisition theories, such as cognitive information processing theory, which explains that learners move from conscious declarative knowledge to unconscious, like a procedural knowledge through practice. In terms of social interaction, although the Russian curriculum encouraged interpersonal practice, students prefer studying independently and use technology, like social media, games, and apps as their main resources, showing a shift away from face-to-face communication. And finally, both higher and lower self-regulated students showed little emphasis on regulated emotions and motivation. And although not directly asked, this gap suggests the importance of effective strategies, which, according to research, are crucial for successful language learning, but often overlooked by learners and researchers. So the study, I didn't put a slide here, but I think that the main three practical pedagogical implications that I drew from that study was that first, using those course-based can-do checklists, we all, as teachers, we use them, we know them, but using them actually in class, going through them, making students notice what they're learning, why they're learning them, and actually make them practice that, especially throughout the first year. So I found that very helpful for students to track and demonstrate their skill development. Second, explicit strategy instruction can be actually incorporated through bi-weekly online discussions. That's where we moved to after that, to introduce and practice strategies related to cognitive, affective, and sociocultural regulation, and balancing their need for language instruction with fostering independent learning skills. And finally, the study, I thought that extending enhanced strategy instruction over at least 2 to 3 semesters, of course, and particularly in affective and social interaction areas, they develop gradually. And of course, a long-term strategy-focused curriculum could better support learners' growth over time, for sure. So that's what I try to do. Honestly, that was my project that was completed in 2020, in the middle of the COVID year. I think, it was a pretty impressive one. But this is something that I keep using in my first year students with my first year, and I develop more with my second year students as well. So, and I find it extremely helpful, and that's, I think, if we can do something a little bit extra to make them more independent, to make them more conscious of what they're doing and responsible for their own learning. So I think it's a truly a lifelong skill that they can really just benefit from learning. And that's it. That's all I wanted to present. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. You
I need to
are
capture,
early. You are a little early, so amazing time management. Not that we need to get through. So, and I see that our Michal from Czechia is also here. So we have all full, the panel is full, all participants are here. I just wanted to let everybody know. And our next presenter is Natalia Parker. Natalia, you will be sharing your slides. I will give you a minute to do that.
Thank you.
And I will remind everybody that I will be timing you for 10 minutes, then for 5 minutes and 1 more minute. I will let you know, so no worries, don't be nervous.
Great. First of all, thanks to Svetlana for accepting me for this roundtable. And unfortunately, I didn't have the pleasure of knowing Cynthia Martin, but I quite like one of her phrases when she said, Russian is not hard. It just takes the brain a little bit to adapt to new patterns a little bit long. And I think my research goes on this idea of making that process of adapting to new patterns or helping learners to adapt, and also informing learners how they can do it better. That's why I view student-centeredness from a cognitive processing perspective. And I quite liked in the chat today, Irina put, I look at the centering the teachers as well as centering the students. So that's why it's sort of two ways. So that's why I will do a little excursus into cognitive. My main questions are really, what does cognitive processing have to do with student-centered research? I'll try and give a short information on how learners' brains learn, and then see how teachers teach from the cognitive perspective, and then see how we can make learning and teaching more learner-centered before from the cognitive point of view. So if we look, I think Tatiana mentioned today the knowledge, different types of knowledge, sorry. And some of you might be aware of it. The declarative knowledge, which is knowing about, and when we present learners with the conjugation table or the declension table or endings for a particular case, it's the declarative knowledge. And the other type of knowledge, which is procedural knowledge, which is knowing how, which cannot necessarily, cannot be verbalized. It's something which we do, like a skier straps the skis and he can't explain with the way the body moves, but he can do it. So when our students open out their mouths, they mainly use procedural knowledge. So if we sort of look now at how learners, so procedural knowledge is an ultimate purpose, but a lot of knowledge which is presented in class is declarative knowledge. So that's why I look at how I can help learners take agency, which is another word which was mentioned today, for how they build that procedural knowledge. Because in class, there is no really enough time to transfer one into another. So I basically teach them to take responsibility for that procedural knowledge. So how do learners learn? Anything, not necessarily language. And if you've seen my presentations before, you might have seen this. They take bits of information, quite small amounts, then they combine them in small portions. Watch the green block. They connect the new block, which is green, to the old ones, which are blue, red, and yellow. And then they use it often. So they connect the new items to the old items, but then use them quite often. And finally, they build their own functional language system. So it sort of goes in the inverted spiral into the inverted helix. Learners sort of recycle the new information together with the old information. So now we will have a look at how, so that's building procedural knowledge. So in the class, we don't always have the opportunity to do that. And ideally, I work with teachers in the UK where I basically do talks and try and help teachers view the way they present the material from the learner's point of view and say, look, it needs to be segmented and it needs to be revisited. But sometimes in the curriculum, we don't have the opportunity to do that. But if learners recycle this in their speaking, that helps the processing. So how do teachers teach? So we take a topic, let's say prepositional, study the topic, provide learners with declarative knowledge, sometimes a little bit of speaking practice to start the proceduralization, and then different topics go one after another in a quite linear way. A lot of the time, we all teach differently, but that's how the textbooks are designed. And this way we build declarative knowledge. So to address this dilemma, so if you basically look the traditional module syllabus, the grammar and the speaking are very often separated. I don't know about the US, but in the UK, we team teach our groups, and somebody would teach grammar and somebody would teach speaking. And it's very different from the learner cognitive processing process. So now, how can we address this misalignment? And the way I do it in my classes is, let's start with small amounts. Do you remember those little blocks? Take prepositional. And we'll take the first ending, yeah, which is the most frequent one for prepositional. And that's everything that my students have to learn to use in their speech.
This is your 5-minute mark.
Thank you. And then they can move on to EE or a CE, if that's the next one. Take sadu is monosyllabics, perhaps like an analog phrase, and then the others would add to it. And then finally arrive to plural and soft and feminines, the third declension. So this kind of allows a learner to choose in where they work. And they start with something and then say, oh, I'm done with this, I'm moving to the next one. So the next bit is sort of connected new to old. So how do you think, I always often asked when I present on this kind of topic, how is storage looks in our brain if you had to visualize. And very often people say filing cabinets, or sometimes they say spider webs. It's actually not as organized. So it looks more like this. This is the recent photo of Berlin from space. Not quite recent, but so if you look, you can see lots of connections, and the East Berlin lighting looks different from the West Berlin, where the connections were established and kept. And really, that's what our brain does. So we need to help our learners to know how they can establish those connections. And they connect to the grammar they've learned. They can do contextualization and connect with their own experiences. They can connect to previously learned topics. They compare and connect to visual images, and they compare it to English. So any kind of connections, but they are individual. We can't help them with that. Well, we can a bit, but it's sort of, it's their job. And finally, we need to use the new items often, and that's where the crunch point comes in. All my students have a Russian buddy, and it's not a person. It's an image, and cognitively, they attach Russian to that image. They keep it on their device, and they have to talk to that buddy 10 or 15 minutes a day. And there are some they choose the most peculiar buddies. I have students talking to Dostoevsky because that's whom they like. I have some boys loading pretty Russian girls' faces and talk to them. Musicians, actors. I have one talking to Putin, apparently. And he is the one who comes up with all the very negative, fresh phrases because he said, I want to tell him everything I think about him. And he comes up with ужасный, невозможный, and so on. So they speak about things relevant to them. They don't make it up, contextualization. They never say the same sentence twice. If they've said it, they can't repeat it. They talk about other people, use plurals, favorite music groups, speak in the past and future, and retell what they read or heard depending on their level. And I always say, if you get bored with your buddy, you're missing the point. Sometimes in my Moodle, I put, we've studied this, take it to your buddy. So the other one is tandem learning. I encourage them. I know Tatiana said they prefer to work on their own. Because speaking and interaction sort of makes the processing more effective. And there is SLA. Thank you. SLA empirical evidence to prove that. So I encourage them to work with other learners. So sometimes it's those who learn the same language from the group. They all have WhatsApp groups and they talk to each other sometimes. And sometimes I even suggest tasks which they can do. Like when we study appearance, they can think of somebody and then sort of describe them without naming them. The other one has to guess. Sometimes it's with the mother tongue. So if I have a connection with the university in Kazakhstan, the school in Kazakhstan, where they can 30 minutes talk in one language and 30 minutes in another, depending on the language level. So basically all sorts of tricks to help them own their learning. But it also helps teachers to view it that way from learners' point of view. So that's my conclusions, references, and images from, and I think I'm in time.
That is amazing. The timing is amazing. Yes, you are out of time and you finished your presentation. Amazing. Amazing skill. It is my pleasure to present our next speaker. His name is Michal, and I am probably not saying it right, so he's going to introduce himself. We worked in a couple of volumes together, but this is the first time I actually get to see his face and say your name, Michal. So please tell us how you say your first and last name, and please, we welcome you to this session. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you much for actually your introduction. So I'm okay with Michael, that's completely good. But officially in Czech, I am Michal. Actually, okay, there is this sound which is quite complicated to be pronounced in my language, but I'm okay with Michael or anything you like. So first I'd like to share the screen if I may. Okay, so I will do my best because I don't have enough expertise with Zoom, so I will do my best. So possibly you will see something on my screen at the moment, and I will just start the presentation right now. So can you see the presentation, please?
Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. So, but something's going on, I suppose.
We'll let you know.
Okay.
Maybe you could also teach us how to say the city where you're from, University of Ostrava, Ostrava, how you say that?
Yes, it's actually Ostrava because in Czech there is the stress falls upon the first syllable, so that's quite an easy language when it comes to stresses.
All right, missed both times. Ostrava.
Yes, okay. Good. So now can you see the presentation?
No, still not.
No, still not. So I will try my best, okay, to retry. Yes, there will be yeah.
Michal, perfect. Something is starting to appear.
Okay,
One, let's look at
perfect. Very
those slides.
nice.
Thank you. Yep.
Good.
I'm muting myself. I will let you know on a 10-minute mark and then
Yes.
5.
Yes, and I will roll you down, okay, if you don't consider this impolite, okay, because I need to see the presentation. Okay, good. So, good. So I'd like to start with some sort of brief introduction of what we've been doing, because this is actually like a sort of mutual task that we did with my wife, Denisa Místecká. Actually, she's not here because she's taking care of our son because it's quite late in the evening. So the point is that she can't be in two places. So that's why she let me present the research that she mostly did. So that was our division of labor. The point is that we are corpus linguists, so we are not like experts in education studies. So we can't share our experience in teaching Russian, but we focus on how the image of Russian has been built in Czech media. And we use, to this end, we use corpora, which are huge like bodies of text that were amassed, and we do some quantitative analysis of these texts. Okay, so I will just flick through the results, and I will try to let's say formulate some implications that these results may have for teaching Russian in my country. So our previous research, and I'm coming back to Cynthia Martin in that, was actually that we were given this honorable opportunity to publish our research in a Routledge book. And this research focused on how Russian is perceived first in media and second in Czech secondary school students. And it created a sort of very complicated picture because Russian is seen as both rough and meek. Okay, it's both seen as beautiful or at the same time as quite, I would say, not beautiful. I would say that much. So it's like the public opinion and the students' opinion in Czech Republic concerning Russian is mixed and is divided. As this was actually something that occurred before the Russian invasion to Ukraine in 2022, so we decided to try a different type of research, and this research and the basis of this research you can see in this slide. So we built two under corpora or subcorpora, as we call them. So the first subcorpus, like sort of amasses or puts together texts from the period from 2017 to 2021. Okay, and the second subcorpus brings together the text from the January the 1st, 2022 to the end of September 2024. Okay, which was the breaking point, because actually this was the end of the corpus that we used to create this subcorpora. We decided to observe the distribution of languages and Russian in 5 media types. Okay, these are anti-establishment media, which are also sometimes referred to as disinformation media, but it depends on the perspective, of course. Mainstream media, opinion journalism, okay, political tabloid, which is a specific type of tabloid that focuses on presenting political events in a sensational way, and then classical tabloid. As you can see, the sizes are quite remarkable. There is a 1 billion there is the number of words is actually 1 billion, and in case of the first subcorpus, and in case of the second subcorpus is actually more than 800 million words. So it is really something that we can build our assumptions on. So I will just move on. So just for your information, I understand this is very chaotic, but this is how the categories of media have been built. We didn't do this. It was done just like a lot of time before we started the research. So just you can see, like if you see, this is like a network of media, like of the people, of what people read actually. And in this case, there are three basic groups: this, I would say, bluish group, this orangish group, and this greenish group. And this like sort of blue group is like the sort of like combination of mainstream and opinion media. The orange group is actually like the disinformation media, let's say these anti-systemic news, okay, and this small green group is tabloid. So you can see that in how the corpus has been built, the corpus that we use to build our own subcorpora. So let's move on. Okay, so well, this is the design of the research. So we focuses on the languages taught at Czech secondary schools with the emphasis put on Russian. We attempted frequency analysis and also media type frequency analysis, and also analysis of the words that co-occur, that occur like in vicinity of the Russian language. Just by the way, a language remark: in Czech language, we have a specific word for the language. Okay, in English, you have like we have Russian, which is both an adjective and a person and the language. In Czech, we have the word for the language. It always ends in ina. Okay, so it's ruština, okay, for Russian, angličtina for English, francouzština for French. Okay, so like we have a specific word. That's why this doesn't produce the bias, okay, because it would be biased if we studied that definitely in English corpora. So I will move on to the results, which is the possibly the most interesting thing. So like first thing I'd like to present is just the frequency change. So this is a relative frequency. This is not an absolute numbers, okay? So it doesn't mean that, for instance, English language occurs, okay, like with the number of 28 occurrences in the corpus. Nope. It is actually the relative metric that focuses on the instances per 1 million. So it means it's something like percent, but it's not percent, it's actually per million. So it's like if there is 28 in case of English, it means that if there were a hypothetical corpus of 1 million words, there would be like 28 items of English. So that would work like that. So you can see that, like, obviously you can see that if you compare the red columns with the blue ones, you can obviously see that there was a decrease in frequency in between these two corpora. Very simply, okay, so the languages are spoken less about, okay, and the period from 2022 on, with one exception, and this exception is Russian. So if you have a look at Russian, so there is an increase in IPM, even though this increase like 5 to 6 looks very minuscule, looks very small. It is quite a big like change, okay? Compare it to percent, for instance, like the change from 5% to 6%. We also like sort of statistically tested these differences between, like in case of all the languages and the two corpora, and we found that all these differences are statistically significant. So even though they look tiny, they are important because they reflect a certain change. So there's less and less information in Czech media about languages, at least these languages that we study, with the exception of Russian. So if you see like this DIN metric, which is in the table that you may see, okay, it's difference index. So you can see that all these numbers are actually like with the minus, which means that there was a decrease. And most considerably, this decrease was in case of Slovak. So our like most, our closest language is not being spoken enough, I would say, in media, with the exception of Russian, the DIN of which is actually like in the affirmative, it's plus, okay, it's plus 8.6 or 0.7 if you round it up. So so there was the first message. Okay, well, the languages are on the decrease generally, but Russian is actually increasing. Okay, this has many reasons, and not all of them are in favor of Russian. That's important to point out. So yeah, so there's another graphic. It's called a heat map that will show the distribution. Once again, it's the IPM metric that you can see, okay, the distribution of languages in various types of media. So if you see that, you can see, and I also highlighted for you because it's not completely visible. So I highlighted for you, it's in this red red rectangles. So it's possible to see like the top scoring media type for each language. So for instance, if you have a look at English, you will see that the top scoring media in which it appears is opinion journalism. So where they formulate some ideas about how English should be taught, whether English should be the like number one foreign language to be taught at schools, etc. Unlike
I
that,
apologize. This is your 5-minute mark.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So, for instance, in the case of Russian, you see that there is like anti-establishment media like speak about this language the most. Okay, in case of other languages, you see the other metric, and now you see the change basically. And I will speed it up a little bit. Okay, so you will see the change. Okay, so if we compare the changes and now you have like this, I would say, put it in words. So you would see that there are so-called, I call it tabloid languages. These are these exotic languages that are mostly spoken about in tabloid press. Okay, but the situation before 2022 was much more diverse. There were more groups. Okay, whereas in case of post 2022 situation, okay, we have 3 languages that we actually basically quarrel about. Okay, it's English, Russian, and German, and you have 4 languages that are seen as languages that are mostly spoken about in sensational news. So you can see that there is a difference in tone and there is a difference of strategy. Okay, what's quite considerable is a shift of Russian. As you see, it used to be language that was used and it was discussed in anti-establishment press. Now it's much more used in this opinion press. So we discussed a lot whether Russian should be like, for instance, chosen by pupils at elementary schools, which is going to be very complicated these days. You will see the last slide, which is not very positive. I'm sorry for that. So that was the frequency change. Okay, if we like get back to something that much more corresponds to words, as we are linguists. Okay, so we don't want to focus only on numbers. It's actually like I would like to share. I would like to show collocation analysis. Collocation basically means the 2 words that co-occur. So, for instance, if you see Russian, so you possibly see that there would be, for instance, a collocate. A word that co-occur would be, for instance, language, or it would be like some other languages, okay, that co-occur with this word. So this is not that interesting. What's much more interesting is that how these words changed, okay, in comparison of the pre-2022 situation to the post-2022 situation. So, for instance, you can see that the higher the rank difference is, okay, the more prominent the collocate became, okay, from 2020 on. So you can see that, for instance, there is Ukrainian, okay, which skipped 5 ranks, okay. So you see that basically the situation of Russian is presented always in confrontation with the Ukrainian language, for instance, okay, which is a big dilemma for Ukrainian people where they should use, because in Czechia, we mostly know, I'm not the generation, but my parents, for instance, they know Russian and they may use Russian to speak to Ukrainians, and Ukrainians may not see it as a very good thing given the contemporary situation, for instance. On the other hand, the words connected to the language itself, for instance, broken, like he spoke in broken Russian, he couldn't speak very well Russian, are very much like backgrounded. You will see that there are minus negative numbers in case of rank differences. It means that it dropped, okay, in that. So you can see this as a changing perspective of how Russian is perceived. Russian is perceived much more in confrontation with other languages. What's also quite specific is that there are collocates that are specifically for the pre-2022 corpus and specific to the post-2022 corpus. So these collocates that are specific for the pre-2022 corpus, they like sort of like they're not always positive. There is, for instance, reproach, okay? There is like sort of like there is, for instance, banned somebody's ear about something like that. We tend to use Russian. There is even a Marxist term, counter-revolution, present there. Okay, if you see that, there are also some names connected to some controversial Russian things. For instance, there is a singer from my town, by the way, Jarek Nohavica, which is this like last but one color cat that accepted like a sort of like a medal for his works, okay, from the Russian president, which was seen by some as sort of controversial given the contemporary situation. On the
Like
other
1 minute
hand, if
mark.
we move, yes, I'm supposed to be to be ending.
In 1 minute.
Okay, very good. So I will make it. Thank you for that. So, like moving to the other, I would say to the other table, we see there like many things connected to disinformation media. For instance, there are people who complain about the fact that people don't understand Russian, for instance. Okay, there is even, I would say, some names that I connected, okay, to like Russian interpretation, okay, of Ukrainian reality. Like for instance, Artyomovsk, okay, which is like the Russian name for Bakhmut, okay, Ukrainian city. Okay, so you can see that, like I would say, this like anti-establishment narratives penetrate a lot into what is perceived as Russian. So I'm moving on, and this is the most relevant, I would say, sheet for the like implications. Okay, so you can see Russian is like more discussed, the only language that's been more discussed in media from 2022 on. So now you see that like it's much more seen in confrontation with Ukrainian, like some there is a perceivable drift toward anti-establishment narratives, and this poses a lot of challenges for Russian teachers in Czechia because, as we see on the very last slide, okay, which says, okay, the following things. Okay, so the current proposal, which comes from January 2025, is that it is supposed that there will be no Russian at elementary schools. So if you are a Czech pupil, you choose English in your first grade when you are 6. Okay, this is obligatory now. And now, if when you are 11, so you choose your secondary language, and you may choose. I would say you have 3 options: German, Spanish, and French. And this Russian will be eliminated from this choice. Okay, even though like there are a lot of people complaining about that, so it's possible that the law will be passed. So you will see that there will be a lot of work from the side of Czech teachers to change the image of Russian, okay, in the years to come. I'm sorry for overtaking the time.
You're great. Thank you so much. We appreciate so much your presentation. So we have, ladies and gentlemen, one more time, I give you Natalia and Ludmilla, Tatiana, Michal. Thank you so much for your presentations. And if anybody has questions, and this is our part of discussion, I would encourage people that I never even heard speak. Please, Jana, Catherine, Denise, this is our opportunity to communicate and discuss this. So thank you so much for unmuting, and I will post one post in our chat before everybody else starts speaking, and I will simply invite everyone to participate. Please submit your proposals. We extended a call for submissions. We're right now working the Routledge's series of Russian language pedagogy and research is putting out a new volume, which is the big book of tasks for teaching Russian. There will be no theory. It's all tasks, all things that you do in the classroom. Task is different from assignment. Task is something that the students do, so it's not an assignment. If you look into that, please. We had some submissions that confused assignment and task. So you have a link for your submissions there. Then you have another link from me to sign up for future calls for submissions, future calls for reviewers, and that kind of thing. For the series, and the final link is for the series itself, Russian, the Routledge's Russian language pedagogy and research. So with this, I invite everyone to please contribute and to contribute your writings and contribute to this discussion. Please unmute and share your comments or questions. I see Jana, please.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Жанна Вернола, я работаю в Мэрилендском университете, мой офис рядом с офисом Синди. У меня даже рядом стоит ее портрет, который мы использовали на мероприятии. Вот, попрощайтесь, Синди, вон ее лицо. Я 25 лет работала вместе с ней по ее книжке Stage 2. Вот, так что для нас это, конечно, была большая утрата. И я эти 2 дня присутствовала на ваших встречах, потому что мне было очень важно. Не могу говорить до сих пор. Ладно, неважно. Наталья, мне очень понравилась ваша презентация про тандем и про как-то imaginary body. Мне просто
Yeah,
интересно.
Russian body or imaginary
Да.
body is good. I like that.
I just recently heard about tandem because we're applying for cultural competency course to do like a Russian 201 general education cultural competency, and we need to work on a part that our students, что наши студенты могут общаться с кем-то помимо того, что в классе с преподавателем. Я слышала, что есть такая программа «Тандем». Ну, speaking buddy я первый раз слышала, мне очень интересно. Вы это как-то проверяете или просто у них этот образ есть? Это как картинка или это какая-то программа, что человек слушает? Расскажите побольше про это.
Да совершенно никакой программы, то есть это очень-очень на простом уровне. Но, с другой стороны, это из моего исследования, когда человек осваивает какой-то язык, он очень часто привязывает лицо к этому языку. Например, вот билинговые, особенно дети, они очень часто вот говорят, вот это лицо говорит вот так, а вот это лицо говорит вот так. То есть вот у них вот этот образ, который на их, они сами его выбирают. И
Просто
он вот,
фотография.
да, может быть, фотография, иногда карикатурная какая-то штучка. То есть очень оригинальный образ. У меня был парень, у него вот здесь брошка была. Как это, вот он ее очень любил, она его детская игрушка была, потом он из нее брошку сделал, значит, мышка. И он говорит, вот мышка – это моя, значит, боди. Вот я везде хожу и с ней разговариваю. Вот, то есть, ну вот, кто во что гораст, вот они очень изобретательные в этом, потому что я пробовала с AI, значит, работать. Но вот, к сожалению, там требуется очень много усилий, очень много нужно загружать туда, а в силу того, что студенты все перегружены, они не хотят прилагать много усилий. А вот этот имидж, он был очень просто. Вот загрузил, и вот сидишь, разговариваешь. И вот те условия, которые я перечислила, это вот обязательно, чтобы вот вы им говорите как регулярно, что это очень мало времени, но они это должны, как англичане говорят, build into their day. То есть очень многие это делают за завтраком, потому что они знают, что вот они там, и что вот у них есть какое-то время. Некоторые, наоборот, начиная слово, они там вечером это делают. Ну вот очень многие делают за завтраком. Я это никак не проверяю, но ужасно интересно. То есть вот я через 5 недель семестра, я знаю, кто использует это боди, а кто нет. Потому что у них настолько развивается вот этот их interlanguage, если знаете, о чем я говорю, то есть вот их собственная система языка, они начинают задавать очень умные вопросы. Они говорят, а вот это почему так? Вот. И у них развиваются речевые навыки. То есть они спокойно могут использовать то, что они выучили, чтобы сконструировать свое собственное предложение. То есть они опираются не на память и запоминание какой-то фразы, а на конструирование фразы ad hoc. Надеюсь, что я ответила. Вот. И еще по тандему. Тандем сейчас очень популярная вещь. Если вы это загуглите, то сейчас даже платные есть компании, которые предлагают тандем. Мы, конечно, ничего платного не используем. То есть мы делаем так. У нас есть клуб, куда мы приглашаем носителей языка. То есть в Лондоне, я преподаю в Лондоне, у нас есть студенты русские по национальности, носители, которые изучают что-то еще. И мы их приглашаем к нам в клуб поговорить. Многие с удовольствием приходят, многие приходят и уходят, а многие вот задерживаются или там периодически приходят и так далее. И мы еще и устанавливаем peer tandem, то есть когда вот они друг с другом. У них есть ограничения, ни в коем случае не мешать языки. Как только они начнут мешать языки, и английский начнет захлестывать. То есть там вот строго, если начальный уровень, я говорю, сделайте 10 минут. Вот не обязательно полчаса. Если полчаса у вас уже дым из ушей, то сделайте 10 минут, поговорите 10 минут, и через 10 минут поменяйтесь. Вот, если это разные языки.
Понятно, спасибо большое, было очень интересно.
Я очень рада, что вы заинтересовались. Напишите мне, если еще хотите объяснить, чтобы время не отрывать у
С
остальных.
удовольствием напишу. У нас сегодня в Мэриленде был день университета, и целый день приходили местные люди. И мы делали значки для гостей. И, конечно, преподаватели предложили слова «привет», «хорошо», «отлично», «молодец». Но мы также спросили студентов, какие слова им нравятся. Сейчас я вам покажу любимое слово студентов. Но это вот слово выиграло «супер».
Как интересно.
Вот «привет». А это я не знаю, кто из вас знает, как это слово переводится. Это студенческий выбор. Вы знаете это слово? Slay. Это сейчас очень популярное слово slay. Это тоже значит хорошо. Но обязательно надо говорить вот так slay. Я не знаю. Это потому, что научили нас студенты. Так что у нас вот такие значки сегодня мы раздавали. Привет, супер и slay. Так что все ваши презентации были slay.
Слушайте, ну что-то такое connecting to Cindy's and her memory. Every time I learn something new. Слушайте, пишем с ней статью, я читаю writ large, and the society writ large. And I'm in this editing mode, at large, changing to at large. Next time I'm talking to Cindy, she says, oh, and this is and writ large. Oh, it's a word. Okay, silly me. Now slay.
What Natalia was talking about reminded me of a personal story that actually connects to Cindy Martin as well. So I was a young student and I was taking the summer program at Bryn Mawr, which was like a 5-week Russian, no, maybe it was 8-week Russian program to try and boost my Russian. And there was a pre and a post OPI test, and Cindy was the person who did that. And I think at the time she was just a graduate student, so it was at the beginning of her career as well. And I got sick during the program, and for over a week, I just had to be in my dorm room because I don't know, it was really bad. But I worried and worried that I would not make any progress in language. So I just talked to myself in Russian the whole time I was in my dorm room. And at the end of the program, I had my next OPI, and I was excited to learn that I made some language gain. And that was also done by Cindy. And I still remember the task I was supposed to do on that OPI. So, and ever since then, you know, she's just been a model that I wanted to follow. So fond memories of Cindy.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much for sharing this.
Final call for final comments, maybe?
Yeah, I have, у меня вопрос к Людмиле. Где вы находите такие прекрасные мемы? Это просто вообще мне так понравились. Какими ресурсами вы пользуетесь?
Еще раз.
Вот.
Я много раз нажимала, и оно опять возвращается в исходную позицию. Я прошу прощения. Я делаю... Вообще я очень много использую мемов, и я последняя моя статья была посвящена мемам о русско-украинской войне, но в данном случае я использовала только мемы о еде. Я делаю обычный Google Search, я ставлю мемы о еде. И потом я смотрю, какие мемы распространены. И потом уже я вижу, что я могу группировать. Например, мемы об идиомах, связанных с едой. Потом завтраки. Потом национальная кухня. Ну, в общем, это как бы trial and error approach. Но я использую простой Google Search. не более,
Спасибо.
чем это. Ну, вы сами, когда увидите, вы сможете понять, что есть какая-то определенная классификация и связанная с вашими интересами, вы можете выбрать и потом продолжать выбирать. Но вообще-то на Фейсбуке есть много групп, связанных с едой. Но в данном случае я не использовала их, но их тоже можно.
А можно, Светлана, я отвечу на ваше предложение по поводу AI?
Да, конечно. Пожалуйста.
Потому что я смотрела, вот когда я поняла, что вот это работает, я, значит, начала смотреть и на EdSil, по-моему, в прошлом году была замечательная презентация, потом я не помню, кто презентовал, кто докладчик был, когда они сравнивали возможности AI на разных платформах. И, в общем, их вердикт был, что нужно очень тщательно записывать инструкции, чтобы вот это работало. То есть там целые полотна этих инструкций, чтобы вот эта интерактивность работала. То есть и я пробовала сама писать эти полотна. То есть и, в общем-то, на бесплатном AI они работают не так хорошо. Для начинающих можно. Чуть выше уровнем. Знаете, что AI не делает? Оно не спорит. То есть, когда вы хотите, чтобы critical thinking, вот, когда они вот говорят, а я вот думаю вот так, вы хотите, чтобы он с вами поспорил? А он говорит, о, да, возможно, я, наверное, с этим согласен. То есть, они запрограммированы, чтобы они с вами не спорили, поэтому на верхних уровнях совершенно невозможно. А Бадди работает везде. Вот, поэтому...
На самом деле я тут хочу добавить, что возможно, просто нужно инструкции такие давать. Нужно,
Да.
например, говорить, я хочу, чтобы ты был моим там Socratic partner. И когда я тебе отвечаю, задавай мне вопросы, когда я тебе отвечаю, ты возражай мне и как бы задавай новый вопрос. То есть это все тоже прописывается инструкциями. Но вы правы, они запрограммированы быть такими ванила. И отвечать очень вежливо, да, потому что, ну, платформу очень сильно критиковали за их предвзятости, за стереотипы, за очень много, поэтому, да, они действительно так себя ведут.
Очень аккуратно, да.
Мгм, мгм. И я написала в чат, что это Молли Блейзинг и Кит Прибл, которые, ну вот у нас в США в основном такие как бы ведущие позиции занимают по исследованию возможного использования AI.
Ну, не хочу spill the beans, но если кому-то интересно, по-моему, их call for proposals for submissions уже прошел на их volume, но они собирают сейчас статьи для их сборника, для the Routledge series for in using AI and working with AI and teaching Russian. If you have experience, if you have curiosities, email them, please.
И, по-моему, готовится специальный выпуск Russian Language Journal на
In the Russian Language
AI,
Journal.
по-моему. Мгм. Так что ожидайте.
Definitely. И участвуйте, ожидайте и участвуйте. Пожалуйста. Ну, наверное, мы закрываем панель нашу, да, Ирина, или как?
Хорошо, я останавливаю запись тогда.
Мгм.